Now, joining us on the news is Benji Ndolo, a political analyst who will discuss the development with us on the news. Thanks for joining us, Benji. You need to unmute your device so that we can hear you.
Thank you very much and good evening. Remind me your name again, please.
Nice to have you around. Now, Somalia has had bombings in recent times that have left many dead. What is the request this time?
It's always the same fundamentalist, Islamic fundamentalist, rhetoric. Basically, that the world has refused to recognize ISIS, the former ISIS that is now mestetized and continued to grow under Al-Shabaab, which is indeed a faction of Al-Qaeda. That they wanted to establish a fundamentalist Islamic state, that the war in Somalia, of which the Kenya government through KDF, Kenya Defense Forces, continues to be an active actor, is in their thinking an illegitimate war, and one that then has to be fought through extremist tactics to bring maximum, fear, casualties, damage, and disrupt constitutional governments. As you know, Somalia has a young government. Somalia has a good relationship with the Republic of Kenya. And so these kind of efforts are to thwart that and to disrupt that. So basically no legitimate demands other than to say, we are continuing to try to establish a somewhat caliphate in the northern Horn of Africa region, and in a sense to spread that across Syria and to the usual suspects. Back to you, studio.
All right, now, talking about how the Somalia government has been young and fragile and just coming aboard. Now, it just switched its government, where Hassan Sheikh Mohamud has handed over to Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo. How do you think this will impact the fight against security or insecurity in the country?
I think that this handover of power continues to demonstrate that indeed Africa, a vast majority of parts of Africa are ready for, democratic, free and fair elections and that kind of governance. As you are aware, Kenya itself has just come from an election, from a general election. The handover of power to Farmajo indeed not only demonstrates that peaceful transfer of power is possible on the African continent, but also that if you're familiar with Farmajo's policies from the recent past, that he would continue to be steadfast against, terrorism, that he would continue what had been called in the past under the former President George W. Bush doctrine, the war on terror, of which Somalia was a key, target of that, even though not named expressly, but Somalia has been a key of that, with North Korea being one of those also identified together with Syria and of course Iran. And I think at that time also Iraq. And so Farmajo's policies would be center-left, liberal, trying to bring a sense of democracy in the country, a sense of freedom, the ability to choose leaders, to go through universal suffrage, and then to kind of deliver on their promises, the first of those being security. And so you can expect a relentless assault on terror cells, on any kind of organizing. And by the way, just in the recent, I've seen a communique from the National Police Service, particularly under Kenya Police, that identified, because we have to be in a very proactive stance in order to prevent terror attacks, that there were predicted to be terror attacks even in Kenya in the last couple of days, and many other times that these are thwarted, that these are disrupted, but that they actually don't make the news. But the war against these kinds of attacks continues and is expected to continue under President Farmajo.
Let's, all right, thank you, Benji. Let's make it broader now. We know that different African countries have been through militia attacks. Some are currently going through it. What do you think the lasting solution should be for Africa?
That's a good question. Unity, and not just a semblance of unity, but a serious attempt at unity, a serious effort at unity has been prescribed as one of the key ingredients and solutions to a prosperous Africa. This, of course, was very much the doctrine of former president of Libya, Muammar Gaddafi. It has been elusive for many reasons. Culture, as you know, the boundaries and the borders were drawn during the colonial rule of the 18th and 19th centuries. And so, you know, without a sense of purpose, it becomes very difficult with the growing menace of corruption across Africa. Corruption has continued to dog African nations, mainly because of, you know, a loosely understood values framework around which governments are formed, growing populations against a backdrop of no jobs, dwindling opportunities, shrunken economies, hungry populations. And so the reality of unity has been extremely elusive, but that would be one of the key achievables that could ensure a prosperous and safe continent, though it is easier said than done. But of course, with champion governance and good, it just takes 2 or 3, you know, strong vision-filled presidents to actually make this happen. And so that kind of unity, and you've seen this already happening under the East African Community that has recently brought in the DRC, the Republic of the South Sudan.
Okay.
There's an effort towards that, but the effort needs to be ramped up to the next level. And indeed, true unity is what would liberate the peoples and secure them even against terrorism, because terrorists also recruit locally to expand their terror networks and terror cells.
Benji, let me just quickly come in now. Following this latest attack, we are being told that a major security shake-up changes will be made. Now, how do you think they have gone about preempting and preventing such attacks? And what do you think this shake-up would mean or would portend for the security apparatus in the country feeding forward?
So the shake-up is a very predictable reaction found mostly, again, on the African soil. It's a tactic used for many years by African heads of state to kind of do 2 things. Number 1, to punish those they feel slept on the job, those that were in charge of security, but in essence failed when this attack happened. They failed to see it, to predict it, to therefore protect the people. But number 2, the other intention is to enhance accountability, so that you are, in essence, when you do the shake-up, promoting those you feel have the potential, have the ability, the capabilities to grow into these jobs, and also those that you feel could have done well but couldn't go over their boss's head, then they get to be in charge of security. And so this is a very common tactic. But again, as your bulletin, I've seen your crawler explain that very well, that through unity and through...
All right, thank you so much, Benji, for coming aboard the news to lend your voice against the fight against terrorism.